Okay, so we're recording now. So I want to welcome you all to our Capital Conference 2021 virtual. We're going to talk about tips from some of the pros for your high school journalism UIL teams. And before we start, I want to share my screen and I want to show you some resources. Can everybody see my screen? Yes, you can. Okay, great. So this is the home UIL. It's just UI. Oh, we got people. I'm also having to let people in. This is the home UIL page, and it's uiltexas.org. And if you go to the academics link and you go down to journalism and you go to resources and forms, I want to show everybody what we've got here. During the last year and a half, we've been recording a whole lot of videos about journalism, different aspects of journalism that if you teach yearbook or newspaper or J1, you could do some of these things. These videos, the first two sets may not work for you if you only are a UIL academic coach, but if your kids want to get exposed to different pieces of journalism, they're really good. And some of these speakers are just amazing. Victor Blue was a photographer, is a freelance photographer out of New York City, and he was at the Capitol insurrection. And he does a video slideshow showing some of the photos and images he got. We also have Scott Pelley from ABC News and 60 Minutes did a session. So they're all different kinds of videos in these first first three sets, sorry. And then when you go down to the fourth set, we've got videos for UIL journalism contests. So there's one on feature writing. And what I did is last year is I broke down them a little bit more. Like the news lead one is a very short video. It's about 10 to 15 minutes and it takes kids through just lead writing. And then I do a direct quote and transition, part 2, and then how to put all those pieces together. And then writing just a feature lead. So it kind of breaks them down. And we also have editorial writing and headline writing. So all of those videos exist on this website and you can use them with your students. You can take pieces of them, whatever works for you. If something's not here that you really wish was here, like, man, Gina, I really wish you could do a video on this, just call me, email me, and I'd be happy to help you any way I can. I spend a lot of time sitting in an office, even when we're not in a pandemic. I'm in my office a lot and I have time on my hands. And now that we've kind of mastered Zoom and mastered recordings, there's a lot of resources that we can do without ever having to travel for you. And that's stuff that you could use in your classroom or after school or whenever you get to meet with your teams. So I just kind of wanted to show all of y'all those resources. And it's on the UIL page, under academics journalism, under resource. And if any of these videos, if you click on them and they say they've expired, none of the UIL ones will expire because they all live on my page. But the other ones I had to put in a Dropbox, and sometimes they expire and I have to change the dates. All you have to do is email me and I will make them live again. And so that resource exists for y'all. And I'm going to stop my screen share. Does anybody have any questions about any of that before we start talking with Lisa and Stephen, and hopefully Cindy will join us shortly? No questions? Okay, so I want to look at who we have here. We have got people we have somebody from Munster. We have Burleson ISD, Bridge City ISD, Prosper, Fredericksburg High School, and Don's from Roscoe Highland. We got a nice across the state. That's cool. So let me introduce you to two of our panelists, and I'm hoping Cindy Barry will be popping in soon. It's the summer and it's hard to keep things straight. So our first panelist is Lisa Roskins. Lisa, will you wave so everybody's? Lisa's up in my screen. She's in the top little corner. Lisa's at Prosper High School, which is a big 6A school. But Lisa also has a whole lot of experience after being at Groom, a tiny 1A school for many, many years. So she's seen both spectrums and she's been successful in UIL journalism at both schools, very successful. So that's really cool. She gives us a broad view. And then Stephen Jones is at Hebron. Stephen, if you'll wave for us. Stephen's up on my screen in the top right-hand corner. I don't know on your Brady Bunch screen where he falls. Stephen is at Hebron High School, and it's in Carrollton in the DFW area, and it's a big 6A, and he's taught journalism for 8 years, and Lisa's taught for 10 years. And what I want to do is I want to pose a couple questions to them and get some insight to them. It's been a long time since I've been in the classroom. I've been in my job here at UIL for 16 years now. So I haven't worked specifically with a journalism team in almost 2 decades, because then I was an assistant principal for a while. So it's been 2 decades. So I'm not in the classroom working directly with students. I come up with videos or I come up with presentations, but I don't work one-on-one with kids that much. These two are in the trenches, and not only do they do that on a daily basis, but they've also been really successful in what they do. So they're going to give us some insight, and then please feel free to use the chat to add some suggestions that you have, things that have worked for you, or if you have a question of one of our panelists, I'd be happy to ask it for you. And if you want to say, can I unmute, put it in chat and we'll unmute you, and then you can ask a question directly. We're small enough, I think, that we can do that. And just one more acknowledgement, we are recording this, so just a FYI. So if you don't want your video on, I totally understand that. So we're going to start, Lisa, with you. And my first question is what is your best tip for recruiting students to your program? And will you talk to both, since Cindy's not with us right now, will you talk to both the small and the big schools?
Yes, I would be happy to. So my best tip I actually got from my daughter, who works for USAA. And they have several corporations have this program where they call it the best people know the best people. So I just tell my friends, my students, bring your friends. Bring your friends who love writing. And that works whether you're recruiting for your publication staffs or whether you're recruiting for your UIL staff. But I also tell them, make sure you bring someone who's going to make your learning load and your experience lighter and more enjoyable, not heavier and more distracted. So, but that's how we do it. And another thing is kind of answers later questions that Jeannie's going to ask. Make sure when they come that the experience is not only a learning experience, but a fun and productive one. And then that's it.
So, Lisa, what's some of the ways that you made sure that it was fun and productive?
Okay, I'll just go straight into that. So for fun and productive, I follow Jim Quick. I don't know if y'all know his book Limitless and the Quick Brain podcast, but he has lots of ways to make learning fun. So on the productive side, we come up with crazy things like in editorial writing, my students were struggling with remembering the meeting and addressing the money issue, which is almost always key in editorials. So one day I brought M&Ms and we read several editorials and we had to put an M and an M on the meeting and the money where it fell in several state winning papers. So, you do things like that. And I didn't get to do that so much during COVID times, but that's a pre-COVID tip. So just little things like that make it memorable and fun. That's one example. Does that help?
That's good. I do like M&Ms, just a heads up. Stephen, how about you? What are your best tips for recruiting students into your program?
Yeah, so I think, I know not everyone has this luxury, but I'll just share the first part. The first thing I do is I make my newspaper staff do. I mean, it's a requirement that everyone at least begins the process of competing, but I know not everyone has the ability to recruit straight from their newspaper staff for whatever reason. And so outside of that, because my staff's not always huge, by the way, I mean, there's been years where we've had 8 kids on newspaper, and even that, how many of them are actually going to be the right type of kids for UIL. What I do also is then just kind of extend the invitation. We have some prerequisite courses, journalism, but even photojournalism. I grab the yearbook kids and I get everyone who's interested into one room. And kind of to Lisa's point, just try to get them excited about it as I kind of introduce what they are. Like I know everyone has different passions, and I'm just lucky that UIL is one of mine. Since I was a high school kid and competed in UIL, it's just something that clicked for me. And so I do get kind of excited about it as I talk through it, and not everyone does. And so that's a big advantage. And I just try to hit the key points on why should they consider it. I talk about the ability for competition, which is not always something that we find in scholastic journalism, and kids might miss it if they're former athletes or whatever. I talk about just the camaraderie we try to build. We do try to make it fun. We don't always do this, but we try to do some sort of team shirt, or one year they had plans for matching hats, but for some reason, but that fell through. But, and then I talk about, I think I've also found the one thing I remind kids of, because they sometimes can see it as just an extra thing on top of a workload they already have, is that my kids that are competing and practicing and preparing for UIL are also normally producing their best work for newspaper at that time. And I think it's just the extra practice, the extra writing. And so it's just an added benefit that I think some kids don't see. So I just try to get a big group, as many as I can, and then I try to convince them that it's worth their time.
Sorry, I muted myself. Cindy Berry has joined us. Cindy, if you'll wave, that's Cindy. And y'all are gonna I'm not lying. I swear this is the truth. She just retired, even though she looks to be about 32. She was at Bridgeport High School, a small 4A. I don't know if we'll see Cindy again, but I hope that she'll join us back at UIL. I think we probably will. And Cindy also has had lots of success. She was also in Decatur High School. Wherever she's gone, she's had really good success, and she's at a 4A. So she kind of brings a little bit of different perspective. Cindy, we started with our first question. What is your best tip for recruiting students to your program? Do you have any suggestions what you do?
Well, I'm hoping I don't repeat what others have said, and I apologize for getting on here late. From other classes that I teach, when I taught English or J1, can y'all hear me? I guess you can. Okay.
Yes.
Obviously, and when I taught J1, I actually taught news writing with my UIL prompts, teaching UIL format, because it's the real deal anyway. Did that with editorial, feature, and headline. And so you can really, if you have a J1 class, you can really identify those kids, that really do stand out when you're teaching that. I also, this sounds kind of corny, but I look for kids that seem to kind of take a liking to me, even in my other classes, the kind of kids would want to take a road trip and learn all of this nerdy journalism stuff. I've been able to round up a couple that way as well. And then also critical thinkers. We can recruit good writers, but if they don't have those critical thinking skills where they can, dissect the prompt and add it, and tell a story the way that we want them to through UIL, I think, it really does help when we find those critical thinkers as well.
That's a really good point, Cindy. And looking back way in my many years ago when I used to be in the classroom, it's for me, it was always two very different types of kids. The kids that did headline writing were often very different from my kids that would do feature writing. And my kids that did headline writing were those quick-witted kids. I want to say they were my smart Alex. I would actually say a different word, but we are recording this, so I will not. But those kids that could make those comebacks really quick always seemed to thrive in headline writing for me. Thanks, guys. Those are great suggestions. I'm going to move on to question number 2. How do you get your students prepared for the UIL journalism contests? What do you do? What do you use? What are tips that you would give? Lisa, let's start with you.
The first thing we do is it's part of routine. We have a meeting day and we keep it. We don't change it around. It's just very practical. We practice every Thursday, and I offer a before school time, an activity period time, and an afternoon time. You don't have to come to all, but you must come to one every Thursday. And again, like I said before, make them want to come. So I try to have something where unexpected each time, if possible. If not, I just say, sorry, sit down. Let's do this, which they laugh at because it was unexpected not to have, to have nothing. But we just go with that. But also, when I teach, I'm looking at my notes, and I'll share those with y'all when we're done too, if you want them. But for do you want like tips on like an example tip for each event?
Sure,
or
whatever
Okay.
you think would be useful for the coaches in this room.
Well, I gave you a little crazy one on how we did editorial, but like Jeannie mentioned, headlines. So number one, in recruiting for headlines, I taught to librarians because your big readers have that big vocabulary. And I ask them who cracks you up when they come in to check out books, like Jeannie said. So those are questions. But for my headline writers, I actually got this tip from Barb Amarand, and she always told her kids, find a who and tell what they do. So that keeps you out of passive voice. So I'll put the word head on the board, and the H will in heads will stand for head. See a head. Find a person who has a head in that article. And you may not use their name because we avoid names, but you use something you can personify and find that head. And then the E in head, you have to be exact. So you'll come back and make sure all your facts are there. The A is action verb. You have to have that action verb, a verb you can see, and we have fun activities with that. And then the D goes back to find a who and tell what they do. And then we say for a future do, please add a to, as in TO, with it, to meet, to call, to whatever. And then the S is just for sell the story. So if you have a concrete noun, an action verb, and it's all exact and it sells the story, you've probably done a solid job. And then for feature writing, I don't know why, but theater kids are great at feature writers. So if you can get a UIL director that will share them with you on district day, and I taught my theater feature writers, and I tell them, just picture your lead. Are you open curtain? Or are you closed curtain? So are you going to open curtain and just set the scene and let your audience see the scene? Or are you going to start with a great action event as soon as that curtain opens? Just find things like that. For news, the biggest tip I give them lately, because of mistakes we make, is if you begin with a WHEN, do not expect to WIN. So if you begin with a win, you won't win. And then copy editing, I have no idea how to teach copy editing. So we just play cahoots and compete against one another. Seem to have had the best results with that. But again, I go back to Limitless by Jim Quick and first you have to start with the resources Jeannie showed you. I mean, we have those PowerPoints memorized before we even begin with our fun stuff, or we throw it in with them. Is that what you wanted?
That was perfect. I love your head thing. I'm gonna need to for headline.
Jeannie, we can't hear you. There we go.
I love your head thing. I want to steal that. I mean, we need to put that in the PowerPoint. That's fantastic. And it's something that'll hang with you. I mean, that was the whole reason why I came up with the little sexy man for editorials, because I wanted it to stay with the kids. It's fantastic. All right, Stephen, what do you think? How do you get your kids prepared? What tips do you have?
First of all, I'm glad to know I'm not the only one who has no clue how to teach copy editing. So we're still trying to figure that out. Thought it was just me. No, I think just really practical things. My students practice a lot. I know that some people do it differently, but we practice a lot, and we kind of, like Lisa said, we have a pretty standard structure we follow weekly, where 1 week they receive a prompt, they have to turn it in by a certain time. The next week they get feedback. We normally discuss that feedback with the whole team so we can see what everyone's doing well, and where everyone's dropping the ball, and then they get another prompt. And sometimes that starts as early as November or something, and we kind of work our way into it, so that we've kind of found a cadence that works for us, to where it seems like they're hitting their stride come March. And I think it just depends on how it works for you. But the other thing, I would just say, the other two big things we do to try to prepare, I just want to make sure, Sharon, is not just like, hey, have them take the prompt home and work on it. That's fine. But I don't always trust that they're timing themselves, or that they're taking it seriously. So we do sometimes a mock competition style in the classroom when time is able. And then also, if you're not already, just make sure if you have the opportunity to take students to invitationals, just getting that competition type setting has been really valuable to students. I don't like taking them to district and it's the first time they've ever sat in a room with other kids. And so we try to get to as many invitationals as we can. We normally get to 2 to get both the set A and set B materials, but and so that's what's worked for us. And then the last thing I'll say is I try to make it going back to the idea of competition. That was something that worked for me as a kid, as a student, just really, I don't know, I was kind of arrogant. And so I wanted to go in and I like to look around the room and be like, oh, I can beat these kids. And so I try not to instill arrogance in my students because that's not helpful. But what I do is have them compete against each other quite a bit. So let's say we have 5 or 6 students who are trying to earn one of the 3 spots for a certain competition at district. That's always my goal. And I have them turn their stories in just like they would at a competition with a number to try to keep it as blind as possible. And I rank it every time they do a practice. I rank those students 1 through 5, 1 through however many there are. It kind of gets them a little bit of healthy competition early on. But B, it helps me evaluate who I should take to district. To say, hey, this kid has consistently outperformed the other ones. And it gives me some raw data too, so I don't make an emotional decision, or I can also justify decisions of, telling a student, hey, I really appreciate your hard work, but maybe next year for district.
That's good. Those are good. In invitational meets, I will make a quick plug for you. We do ILPC, which is the other half of my job, and TAJE does do a virtual meet. So if you are looking for an invitational meet next year, we do one usually December or January, and we get that information up on the website. It is a virtual meet, but we are very particular about our judges so that we can give you all lots of feedback. Cindy, let's go to you. What are your best tips on how you get students prepared for the contests?
Well, most of my tips have already been spoken by these other 2 amazing coaches. But like they mentioned, your UIL PowerPoints on the UIL website are a wonderful place to. I even use those when I'm trying to figure out who is interested in what. If I have a blanket group of kids and try to figure out where to plug them in, we start going through that. But that's really good throughout the year. The UIL practice meets. There are some others in the state too. There's some other writing contests, and you can kind of search for those as well, especially if we're kind of used to not traveling, although I'm ready to travel again and go to those meets in person, I think is crucial. Another thing though that I wanted to add is sometimes, our journalism teachers across the state of Texas are amazing, and they're helpful, and they share. And sometimes, I've had a friend who was toying between maybe 2 kids for the last spot in headline, and she would send me those headline prompts, and I would judge them like I was judging a meet and help her pick. But critiquing, if you can pair up with someone at a nearby school and just trade papers and critique them, just a different set of eyes on those papers besides our own, I think sometimes really helps. And sometimes I've been fortunate, to find someone local. We've got a lot of small schools in my area and my county. And sometimes we pair up and just have a 2 or 3 school meet. It's just journalism. And you can do those in the evening, or you can do them on a Saturday too. But sometimes that helps again because you've got 1 or 2 more sets of eyes on each kid's paper. And I think that's very helpful. One thing that I also show, especially when we're preparing for like regional or state, and you've kind of done what you can do, I like to pull those former state champion stories, and maybe we just look at leads for editorial. We look at the first 2 paragraphs or whatever that might be, just to kind of give them a different, some different looks on, what good leads have looked like in the past. I think those are very helpful.
Thanks, Cindy. And if y'all are wondering what she's talking about, with the UIL Resources Pack that we give for journalism, we include all the contests from the previous year, and then we also include the state champions of that year for all the contests except copy editing, because copy editing we give you a key for. And as far as prepping for that contest, just have them memorize the AP style book. I will tell you, we are changing that contest a little this year. We are going to do some tweaks. And one of the tweaks that we're going to do is we're going to allow students to have the AP style book in the contest. We are not going to extend the time though, so that it will still be 15 minutes. So they still need to have a very good base knowledge of spelling, grammar, punctuation, and the style book. But if they have one thing that they're really, set on, it'll get, they may be able to have time to look one thing up. We also are making part 3 mandatory. If they don't attempt anything on part 3, they'll be disqualified, because what we're finding is we're getting ties, and we don't have ties in journalism. And so that is, we're not saying they have to complete part 3, but they've got to attempt it. Because what some kids are doing is that they're really spending those whole, doing 5 minutes on the front page on part 1, and then on part 2, they're doing a whole 10 minutes, and they're really diving in and doing a good job. And then they're not paying anything attention to part 3. And part 3 is really important because that's at really higher level editing. We really want to encourage that with kids. So those are a couple changes that will be happening this year for copy editing. So our next question is what's your best tip to help coaches find success in the contest? Cindy, let's start with you. How do you get to be an award winner like you?
I think the best tip, and Stephen kind of touched on this earlier, is just to take them to an actual contest. Expose them to contests that are within the time limit. The instructions are read. It's the stress situation. Just having, and again, that's just reiterating what he said, but having at least, if not more than one of those under their belt, I think really gives them a little bit of an advantage, over everyone else, because sometimes those kids that are, high anxiety and stress level, sometimes they just freeze up in a situation like that. But I just don't think there's any other comparison. We can do all the practice we want to at home. I just don't think there's any other comparison than putting them in a real situation.
Okay, Stephen, what about you? What's your best advice for finding success?
Yeah, I think my best tip is if in addition to going those invitationals, the other nice thing is that at most of those invitationals, you also have an opportunity to judge. And I think being in that judges room has, especially when I first started, was incredibly helpful because there were a ton of other really smart, successful advisors in there and coaches in there. But the other thing is that you'll learn that judges have certain pet peeves that maybe don't bother you so much, that you can help your kids avoid. One example for me is just a personal thing in editorial. There are a lot of editorials that I'll read where I feel like the call to action is implied and not even necessary. But then the judge next to me says, "Hey, where's the call to action? Throw it out, check minus." And so my kids are going to have a call to action just to be safe in their stories, because I don't want them to have that judge that's their thing that they get hung up on. So you can learn a lot just from listening, but also you can just start to see like, hey, it may not bother me that much, but it could bother this judge. And I don't want that to be the reason my student doesn't have a chance of placing. So getting in that judge's room has been really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. And because our contests are subjective, it's hard. And so the more viewpoints you can get, the better. And it also makes you a better teacher to judge with somebody. Even if you've never done it before and you're nervous, journalism people are the nicest people, and they will help you. They will help you get to the point where you feel comfortable judging. Lisa, what about you?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that, get in the judge's room, because boy, do you learn so much. And I even want to encourage all advisors and all judges. Jeannie, I'd love for you to send this out because, judges contradict one another, as Stephen said at times. But if what we could just in headline writing have all the judges read the AP style headline section, there's an actual headline section in the AP style book. And then that helps. You don't have the issues of one judge saying you didn't use a numeral or numerals correctly and another saying you should have spelled this one out. It would just be nice if we all read that headline section. And the other thing is, though, best tip to find success, make your kids feel good. Your kids need to feel like winners. And for that, I send notes. I tell them the authentic greatness I see in them. I don't fluff anything up. And make your kids, first off, prepare them well and let them know they are prepared. The other thing, make them know the rules of the contest. The last time we actually got to go to Austin in person, my little headline writer was like, "Why are you walking me to the building so early?" I said, "I want to make sure you know where we're going. You need to know where it is in case I go help somewhere. And I want you to be able to get there on your own." So we got there. And then when it was time, I got her there an hour early. I wasn't needed anywhere else. And she found her seat and sat in there. During that session, Jeannie had to disqualify a headline writer for arriving late. It broke her heart, but she followed the rules. And my headline writer just watched in horror, going, I guess the rules do matter, and knowing your way does matter. And just think of everything they may need to know to have success.
And guys, one of the things that you can do for your kids to help them out along the rules is you can give them the journalism handbook and let them go through the journalism handbook. It's got the rules in there because we don't want to disqualify people, but there are some things that bind my hands and I don't have any choice but to disqualify a student. And so if they know all those rules, they are going to be able to follow those rules. It's the most frustrating thing is that like we had a kid, second or third year we had copy editing and I had to DQ a kid because they were using an AP style book during the copy editing contest and their advisor hadn't told them that they couldn't. And it was at the region level. This kid, had the opportunity to possibly go to state. So it's a tough thing. So I think those rules, Lisa, I think it's a really good point. It's really important that your kids know those rules, not just you, but that your kids know them too. If they accidentally put their name on a paper or anything like that, those kind of things can really come back to haunt them. So then our next question here is, what resources do you suggest? And we've talked about quite a few, but if you have any additional resources, if you would just share those. Stephen, let's start with you.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any additional ones. We just stockpile as many prompts as we can. And so we have some really old ones that were left in the room from before I even got there. And we just use everything we can. Because it does get tough when a kid competes for 2 or 3 years and you're like, I don't know if I've got a lead time prompt you haven't seen. You mentioned the handbook but even the description of the contest, and it's pretty lengthy, but we've scanned in those books, and I have some students that just learn better that way, that'll read 20 pages on editorial writing, and that's what they want to do. And then I don't remember who it was. Someone did bring it up earlier. I think it was Cindy. We really like to use those state winners as good examples pretty frequently. We use the story samples, of course, as well, but it's nice to be able to see, hey, this is what someone in your shoes wrote under these circumstances. Where do you measure up? And we like to use those quite a bit.
Those are good resources. Cindy, what do you think? Do you have any extra ideas?
Well, everything that's been spoken is on my list. Just final is just to read good news stories or good newspapers. And I never thought this would be a thing, but I worked where the local newspaper was not journalistic, not Decatur, theirs is great. But my kids got a hold of that and sat down and buried their heads in it and just started copy editing it like crazy. And it kind of cracked me up, but it was also an aha moment. If you can find some of those small town publications, sadly, that are not very journalistic, but just reading, I think reading good news story or good newspapers, whatever your choice of that might be, I think that does help. And the kids will start to read it in a more critical way. They'll start to look for the nut graph or the call to action or whatever that might be. And if they can point those out and spot them in other publications, that's going to enforce their writing as well.
Lisa, how about you? You have any other resources, suggestions that you would give?
Go to as many workshops and conferences as you can. So they help a ton. ILPC has a workshop in the summer, and my students always leave knowing so much more than they knew when they came in. Well, and just the fact of hearing it from someone else. It's like your own kids. When someone else tells them besides mom, or they get that confirming word from another mom, they know, okay, it's not just my mom. But I just think workshops help. Also, those state winners. I had one of my little freshman headline writers break down every state winner she could get her hands on. And she looked at them headline by headline by headline. And she said, I spend all my time trying to come up with those creative, wonderful zinger things. And you know what wins? And I said, what? She had charts. What wins is solid but boring. I said, okay. So when she came out her freshman year in headline writing at the state meet, I said, how'd you do? She said, I was solid but boring. And she took second by half a point. So that's pretty cool. The other thing is, I don't know, I guess I've ordered lots of expensive resources in the past, but I have to be honest, I haven't found anything better than just what's at that UIL resource page. So just go there. That resource page is amazing in the journalism section. So I guess that's my biggie.
Thank you. Those are all really good tips. We've had Nita Morrow join us from Lindale. Nita, your video's off, but you want to unmute yourself and say hi?
Hi, can you hear me?
We got you. We got you.
Yeah, new computer in my office, and I kind of missed your email, so I
It's
was
okay.
sliding in last minute.
It is totally fine. So do you have any just really good wisdom or tips that you want to share with the group before we take questions and wrap up? What's Nita
Tips
is at Lindale
regarding winning or what?
Anything, how you recruit, how you create a successful program. The program at Lindale is crazy successful. And what's really cool, Nita, I'm just going to brag about your school right now, is I got the chance to go visit her school in the spring, late spring. And when I walked into that school, the school honors their UIL academic winners. There is hallways dedicated to those students. It's incredible. They're just as important in that school. When you walk in, you visually know they're just as important as the football team. And that's a super cool thing that your school does, is that they celebrate all those students. Because let's face it, watching a journalism meet is not very exciting. Sometimes participating in it is not always exciting if I don't write a good prompt, but winning is. And those celebrations, that's a really cool thing. So let me just, I needed to talk about that just for a second before I'll let you talk, but I will now let you talk, Nita.
I would say that the thing that makes our district different is that our administrators have buy-in. So if you have an administrator with buy-in, then they're going to support your program. That's obviously case by case, school by school basis. The second thing is, and Jeannie will attest to this if you could see me, and be glad you can't see me right now, it's so bad. I have a very strong personality, and so I drive the children. So whereas all these other people are probably talking about, resources and studying and what to study, mine is sheer track the whip, and we go to a ton of practice meets. And so I would say practice meets are the number one thing that, in terms of actual training, that's important. Having buy-in from your administrators, I'm also harsh. I don't know how many of you, we all have different perspectives, but I am harsh with my grading of my own students. I will write on the papers, like giant red pen, what is this? This is garbage. Hide your face in shame. I'll put those things. I'll put, this is not what I taught you to do. And they're fine because they went through my honors journalism class where I'd already tortured them once. So it's not really a huge surprise to them. They can take it, is what I'll say. And if they want to win, they're going to need to take it. I don't know. What else did you want to know?
No, those are good. Those are good. And I'll tell you, how many people did you have at state this year, Nita?
How many? 4 went
4.
to journalism. And then we had a state champion, and then we won the overall.
Okay, so and being harsh works for her. I don't know if you'd call it harsh. I think I might call it tough love, because I've seen her interact with her kids, and she also loves them a lot too. So there's a nice balance.
I do. They know that I love them if I want them to do better. I just don't mince words. And I mean, some people may see it as harsh, is what I would say, but no, I drive them pretty hard. I have high expectations. There's no reason why any kid from any of your schools couldn't win. They can. Sometimes there's this tone about a school. I've taught at different ones where they don't care about UIL. And so it's like, whatever, I'll just put somebody on the bus and slot them into copy editing. Okay, that might work for copy editing with an English student, but I mean, if you've graded papers, I'm sure you know it's a disaster when they do that. So in your school, really the key for everything at Lindell, because is the school buy-in, the admin buy-in. The very first day of school convocation, the superintendent gets up and he says goals. These are our goals for the year. And every single year since I've been here, his goals is every single time, all right, I want to win district from elementary up through the top. And he really places it as a realistic thing. Like, no, I really expect you to do that. So people get on board and get fired up and off they go. And if you could really have some administrators buy in, it changes the culture of your school. Then you make it important. When kids see it that it's important, then they want to be a part of it. Then they're willing to do what you tell them to do. And winning helps.
And I think that's key, Nita, is creating that culture. And it's hard to create it if it's not already created at the school. But even if you can create it within just your UIL academic coaches, try to set that. I know that I went to McKinney High School one year, and she had an awards board for her kids. And it didn't matter if they got an honorable mention at an invitational meet, whatever it was, their name was on the board and they were highlighted and they were celebrated. And it was a big deal. And by the end of the year, that wall was covered with student names. And
that's a great idea.
And one of the kids was like, do you see my name's up there 4 times? I mean, and the kid only one honorable mention, but that was someplace that kid was on that wall and probably wasn't on any other wall in the school, and celebrating those kids just as much as you would celebrate a baseball victory or a football win or anything like that. Melinda asked a question, and guys, if you want to, you can put any questions in the chat that you would like at this point. Melinda asked a question about, she is at a low socioeconomic school, so traveling is hard for her for invitational meets. But I would tell you, Melinda, there are more and more meets that are happening virtual, where you can have your kids and you can create that environment in your school, bring them in, and you can bring them in on a Saturday or hold them after school and create that time, that time stress, and give them that real feel, or just bring in another school and do it together. You don't always have to go out to one of the, travel with your kids. It's kind of cool to get up at 5 a.m. and go with your kids to an invitational meet. Y'all are laughing. There are some things I do miss. I do miss getting on a school bus, a yellow school bus at 5 a.m. To travel with my kids to an invitational meet. But there are other ways to do it, especially now since we've lived through this pandemic. We're learning a little bit more about the virtual world. We fully anticipate being back in full person this year. We will have 2 student activity conferences. One of the panelists spoke about getting out to conferences. We will do at least 2 student activity conferences this year in the fall. I don't know the location. I believe one of them will be at the University of Texas at Austin, and it is a free conference. And then the other one will probably be in Tyler or the DFW area. We won't be able to travel as much across the state this year just because of budget issues, but we are going to get out as much as we can. And then in the summer, ILPC and TAJE, we just finished our summer workshop a week and a half ago, and we do have a class called the UIL prep class. And for the last several years, Michaela Tedder has taught that class, and she is probably one of the most winningest journalism coaches in the state, hands down. I mean, she's pretty amazing. And my favorite story about Michaela is she had a freshman that came to her class, that summer class one year, and that freshman had never done UIL journalism, took her summer class, practiced some during the school year, a little with her teacher, but went to state in all 4. It was before we had copy editing, and she medaled in all 4 at state, and she was a big 6A school. So that's huge. So Michaela knows what she's doing. So does anybody have any questions or anything? You're welcome to put it in the chat. You can raise your hand and take yourself off mute. And you can ask it of any of the panelists or of me. We're going to wrap up in just the next few minutes, but I want to, if there's any burning questions, we've got 4 really amazing, and I'm sure you're all amazing, but we have 4 amazing coaches who've seen quite a bit of success in their years of teaching. So if you have any questions, feel free to wave at me or use the little hand up, and you can unmute or you can put it through chat. If you don't, I'm going to put my chat. I'm going to put my chat in chat. I'm going to put my email for everybody. If you need links to where any of the resources are, if you need to know how to order prompts, or if you have questions about any of our contests, please don't hesitate to email me. Lisa, can you repeat the head thing again? Is in the chat. And that really is brilliant. Oh, she's
I put the link there. And Jeannie, I want to add one more thing. Prepare your students for the unexpected. Prepare them for when their printer doesn't work. Don't have them panic or freak out when their computer crashes. We even practice for the unexpected. And then they know what to do. I watched a young man at a state meet get up, give his computer to a crying competitor from another school, and he calmly, his advisor had prepared him well. He let her use his equipment. He calmly wrote. He took first place. So have them be ready.
And if they are using computers and printers, guys, train
Jeannie,
them.
you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me? If they are using computers and printers, and I highly recommend that they do, tell them to print every 15 minutes. I do it at state, and because it's really disheartening to disqualify a kid when they can't print. But if they print every 15 minutes, they know 15 minutes in if their printer won't work. And so then they can just start handwriting. Or if their printer, they print at 30 minutes and then all of a sudden it won't print at the very end, they've got at least something to turn in. So I think prepping them and teaching them those skills is really, really important. Sylvia asked, AP style book is only allowed in the copy editing contest. No, the AP style book is allowed in all contests. And it was not allowed in the copy editing in the beginning, but we are making some adjustments. We're doing some tweaks to that contest, and what's one of the tweaks that we are going to do. I want to thank all of y'all for joining us. I want to thank especially Lisa, Cindy, Stephen, and Nita for joining us. I super appreciate your input. Y'all know this stuff better than I do. You live it every day. I just sit in a little office and write prompts about my imaginary town, Leak Town, where sometimes I go when I'm sad. But if you have questions, please don't hesitate to email me or give me a call. I'm going to be out of town for the next week and a half. So if you email me then, it'll give me some time to respond. But I'd love to help you any way I can and help your students any way I can. Our goal is for kids to have as much success as they possibly can. So we want you to feel comfortable in what you do. And I don't know if it was Lisa or Cindy who said journalism teachers are the most giving, nicest people in the world. It really is. They really are. I tell my boss all the time, I'm the luckiest person in the world to work with journalism people. If you're struggling, if you don't understand something, my guess is somebody in your area will help you, will work with you, or will work with your kids. It's amazing what journalism teachers do for each other, because they want students to be successful, not just their kids. They want students to be successful. And my favorite thing is when I'm judging and at an invitational meet and somebody knows, well, this is my kid's paper, so I can't judge it. I'm going to give it to somebody else. And they don't want to be unethical. They want the best kid to win. So it's pretty cool. I love working with journalism teacher. Couldn't have a better job at all. If y'all have questions, Lisa's also put her email in there. So if you need any help, she's pretty sweet. If you need anything, let me know. I'm going to stop recording.